All right, everybody, welcome to the Inside Sports Studios. I'm Charles E. Smith Jr., and this is another Inside Sports production of Football Talk. As you know, I do not do the show alone. I enlist some of the best talent I can find. And once again, my co-host this week, it will be none other than Chris Lardieri of FootballNation.com. Some of you already follow him on Twitter at Chris L. Sports. So a lot of big games this week. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. From an undisclosed location somewhere in Southern California, Mr. Lardieri. How are things, man?
Mr. Smith, everything's great as always. I look forward to our weekly appearances and talking some football. Thanks again.
There we go. Okay, so, you know, at FootballNation.com, of course, you got your weekly column going on. What's the latest goings on there in Football Nation?
In this week's FN Follies column, which takes a little more of the humorous and kind of tongue-in-cheek look at what's going on in football, my column's entitled Tom Coughlin and Greg Schiano's Meadowlands Melee, so you could see the fun I'm about to have with that. Also talking about Jay Cutler throwing his teammates under the bus, shoving his left tackle. Josh Morgan gets the bonehead play of the week for throwing a football at Conrad Finnegan's head in front of the refs and ending any chance to tie that game up with a field goal. And then also talked about these odd commercials for NFL.com and NFL Network Thursday Night Football. This guy with the beard and the blue suit, I know everyone's seen him. No one knows who he is. Is he Will Ferrell crossed with Abe Lincoln, crossed with Willy Wonka? I don't know, but he's not funny. So those are some of the topics I broached this week.
All right, well, you know, let's go ahead and get right into it this week. So we talked about, you know, of course, bonehead plays, which happen all the time, but yeah, you got to say Josh Morgan and the play at the end of the game with the Rams and the Redskins. Redskins in field goal range. He takes a 15-yard penalty, which takes his team out of field goal range, and ultimately they lose the game because of it.
Yeah, I don't care if you've got the regular refs or replacement refs, but doing it right in front of the sideline when one of the line judges is there. And I know Finnegan's a chippy player, and he kind of gave him a shot to the chin, and he probably deserved that football heaved at his head, but you don't do that. You control your emotions. And, you know, Billy Cundiff, we all know his little reputation of kicking field goals in clutch situations. He went from kicking probably about a 47-yarder to having to kick a 62-yarder, and we all know how that ended. And I give Morgan credit. He apologized after the game. He said he lost his emotions, but you just can't do that in the NFL. Every week matters, and hopefully Mr. RG3 gave him a little talking to.
Exactly. So, you know what? Let's go from, you know, from the bad or the ugly to some of the good. Let's talk about my Miami Dolphins. Reggie Bush, who really went out there and he left the Raiders gasping for air, for air. Rushed for, I believe it was 172 yards, a couple of TDs. And, you know, does this signal, one of two ways you can see this, does this signal a coming out party for the Dolphins, or does this signal just how much disarray the Raiders are going to be in this season and for the rest of the way, or a little bit of both?
Or I would say a little bit of both. I don't mean to sit on the fence any further, but the Dolphins were a pretty decent team last year given their record. Matt Moore kind of quarterbacked them to a few more victories than they should have. Bush really came into his own last year, and he's going to continue that this year. And if Ryan Tannehill can play steady like he did on Sunday against the Raiders, you know, the Dolphins might not be half bad. We might not be looking at a 1-15 team. If you were to put a gun to my head, I think this signals more that the Raiders are in disarray. Same old story, defense unable to stop a running back. Carson Palmer and his offense really just completely sputtering. And with them, as McFadden goes, so go the Raiders. You stop him, you got a good shot at winning. And I'm not sure what to think of this. I know Al Davis is gone, and there's a new regime in there with Allen and McKenzie as the GM, but better turn things around quickly because it just looks like the same old Raiders.
Right, and well, I think one problem they had was they fired Hugh Jackson, who was the head coach last year. They fired him for no reason. I mean, literally no reason other than he was linked to the Al Davis regime. So then they bring in Dennis Allen, the new head coach. Hugh Jackson was the one who had gotten them kind of back on track. They fire him, and that was really a lot of the motivation. Last season was what he had instilled in the team. They go and yank that leader out and put another guy in, and it looks like the wheels have come off.
Yeah, and hand in hand with that, Hugh Jackson was really the guy who brought Carson Palmer over from Cincinnati, lobbied
Right.
for him. He had coached him at USC, he had coached him with the Bengals, and it was kind of his baby, so to speak. So now you take away that offense. He comes into year two with a completely different offense. No Hugh Jackson, starting to question the validity of either of these moves.
All right, so of course that's the Raiders and just more and more turmoil. But let's go ahead and over to the NFC, and we're going to talk about a couple of gold helmeted teams now. One with red trim, the other with black trim. Let's go ahead and start with the first one, which is the San Francisco 49ers, looking more and more like they are for real. They thumped the Packers, they thumped the Lions, and just showing no sign of letting up. And when we did the preseason show, I really questioned whether the 49ers were for real, and it seems like they're proving me wrong so far.
Yeah, so far they look like a team on a mission. I mean, that defense is all but intact. I think they returned 12 players and 11 of the same quarterback on defense. On offense, Alex Smith looks like he really enjoyed working with Harbaugh and learning that system, given the full off season to take advantage of it. They look good. They really do. And, they'll be tested a little bit coming up here. It'll be interesting to see how the Cardinals, who really pulled off the shocker of the week with a young, aggressive defense, face off with the 49ers. That should be a good matchup. And then I've got my calendar circled for October 14 when the Giants come back in the rematch of that epic NFC title game. So it should be interesting. But, I mean, as of right now, I do not think Jim Harbaugh is going to take his foot off the gas. His team is clearly on a mission.
Now, you say you've got that game circled. Have you also got gas money saved so you can get up there to the Bay Area?
To be determined. We shall see. Let's put it this way. There are a lot of 49er fans who have come back to Candlestick in its farewell year. So depending on ticket prices, we'll see. I mean, I'd like to go. It's going to be the only West Coast swing for the Giants. But we'll see what the budget holds. And, by that time, gas may be $6 a gallon, so it could be out.
Exactly. So let's go to the other gold helmeted team, and that is, of course, the gold and black of the New Orleans Saints, who it seems like, and I talked about Greg Williams being the defensive coordinator, and the whole thing of Bountygate broke. But what I thought was interesting about it was that I had never considered the Saints defense to be fearsome. And then Bountygate breaks, and now maybe we know why he had to put a little extra incentive on the table to make those guys play. I mean, can they stop anyone?
No, and I know a lot of people have said, well, they've got to learn Steve Spagnuolo's system. He's a new defensive coordinator. They point to when he was with the Giants here. Mm-hmm. They won the first Super Bowl over New England. They started out 0-2, really got lit up by the Packers one week. That's all well and good, but A, I don't think they have the personnel, and B, this is a team who's got an interim for the interim head coach. And I don't care what anyone says. Everyone says Drew Brees is a coach on the field. Maybe so. Maybe he's like a Peyton Manning in terms of being his own offensive coordinator. But he certainly can't coach defense, and that team misses Sean Payton at the end of the day.
Right, exactly. So let's go ahead and move on. And, a game, I know you're kind of chomping at the bit to get at this one because it was just a huge comeback win. And, for your team, the New York Giants, another chapter in what I am now officially calling the Book of Eli. The Book of Eli is not an easy read at all. It has its ups and downs. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll go through the full gamut of emotions. But at the end of the day, the Book of Eli, if you can take the drama and you're not faint-hearted, the Book of Eli proves to be a most interesting and ultimately satisfying read.
It is. It's somewhat its own little Disney movie for adults who like professional football. And, given he's won 2 rings, when he threw those interceptions, you will always scratch your head. But at the end of the day, there was some sort of fire lit under this guy. In the fourth quarter, he rallies, he turns it on, he focuses. I liken it to the kid who would write his term paper the night before it was due. Guy just works well under pressure. Now, the Giants' defense, however, clearly needs a bigger fire lit under their rear ends because they had no pass rush whatsoever for a huge portion of that game. And Josh Freeman was just free to throw all over that weak secondary. So I think they need to get their act together too, because with a beat-up secondary, the only way you're going to defend against the pass is start knocking the quarterback down or getting to him.
Exactly, that front seven, and that's really what the Giants are known for. In fact, honestly, if we look at both of the eras, both of the generations of great Giants teams from back in the mid '80s with Parcells and coming forward, it was really always about that front seven. They were never known for having great defensive backs, but the quarterbacks and running backs were so terrified by the front seven that they didn't get a whole lot of time to make a lot of plays downfield.
Definitely, and when you say that, the first person who comes to mind is my favorite Giants mediocre cornerback of all time, Elvis Patterson.
Ooh, Toast?
Parcells. Exactly. Affectionately called him Toast because he got burned so much. But you know what? The guy got a Super Bowl ring thanks to the 7 guys in front of him.
Exactly. So Eli, and this week, 3 touchdowns along with 3 interceptions, but a great comeback win, 510 yards. What can you say? And what I like about Eli is that really he has the mindset, I think, when they talk about defensive backs, having that short memory. And that is, Eli may be playing bad, may have had a bad quarter, may have had a bad half or whatever, but it's hard to just get him to the point where you know that he's just beaten and that's it. Eli always comes back, and even through the worst games that he may be having, but still there's never a point where he just throws in the towel mentally.
Definitely. He's got kind of the makeup I liken to the great closers in baseball. He shrugs it off. He's back the next day, the next quarter, or whatever. It doesn't bother him. And I know when he first came to New York, everyone kind of poo-pooed his aw shucks attitude. But if anything, I think it fits him perfectly for the role.
All right, and let's go ahead to, some of the not so great. We talk about, we mentioned Jay Cutler a little bit. And when we get into not the quarterbacks, but let's talk running backs here. We talked about Reggie Bush, but a couple that are really kind of under the gun. And we got to look at Michael Turner for the Atlanta Falcons, who 2 games, he's got 28 carries and 74 yards. That sounds pretty bad until you look at Chris Johnson, who held out for that big contract a season ago. Chris Johnson threw 2 games, 19 carries for 21 yards. That means for him to reach 1,000 yards, I think he'll have to get about 962 carries?
Yeah, he's going to be a tired guy, and I know we talked about this in our pre-production meeting. I think Cam Newton outran him on Sunday, and you made the great point that Cam Newton outran him for the season on just 1 play. It's really sad. You're hearing a lot of the so-called NFL insiders saying it looks like this guy is just taking the money and run. Not sure quite to make of it. Now, I know faced 2 good run defenses in New England and San Diego, but they're not the 85 Bears.
Right.
Not quite sure what to make of it with Johnson. With Turner, I think he'll eventually get going. The Falcons really need him to get going. They can't be slinging the ball 50 times a game with Matty Ice.
Right.
But getting a DUI immediately after a big Monday night win over Denver is not going to endear yourself to your coach, that's for sure.
No, it definitely will not. And, let's talk about that Monday night game. Of course, Matty Ice facing, the future Hall of Famer Peyton Manning, a big game. And that's one thing I talked about was Matt Ryan needs to learn how to win these big games. So Peyton Manning, and those of you who know his history a little bit, great regular season numbers, not so great in big games or postseason. And Manning looked like in that first quarter was kind of in, let's go ahead and call it playoff form with 3 picks. So the game was basically decided right there.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess the Broncos aren't going 16-0, and they're not cashing their proverbial ticket to New Orleans in February. But I'm not surprised. I mean, Peyton's a little rusty. The defense gives them a different look, or they've got a halfway decent secondary. I'm immediately thinking of how Bill Belichick throws different looks at Peyton periodically over the years. You can fluster him. You get him out. You kind of get him out of that rhythm. You knock him out of that no huddle, just boom, boom, boom. And the Falcons did a good job of that. Now they kind of let the Broncos back in the game, but by then, too little, too late. So I think we learned that Peyton still is a mere mortal.
Most definitely. So, and the Cowboys, that's one team. And as we talked, like we say in pre-production, I said the Cowboys, I gave up really 2 seasons ago in trying to analyze the Cowboys because, as you mentioned, they're an 8-8 team. That's just how they are. But it doesn't matter. There's no rhyme or reason to who the 8 wins or 8 losses even come against. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, they're impossible to figure out. They're kind of like a Rubik's Cube, per se. They make a lot of mental mistakes. I don't get it. I saw a lot of drops on Sunday, special teams gaffes, inability to tackle on defense, and you just never know which team's going to show up. So, I guess it's the same old Cowboys. We'll see now. Seahawks got a good, underrated defense. I get that, but Russell Wilson doesn't. If I was a defensive coordinator, wouldn't leave me up at night with nightmares. And nice player, but shouldn't be beating you like that.
Exactly, and whereas I just think that and I've talked about DeMarcus Ware before as well, and that is he puts up has these great games, puts up all these great numbers, but really it's almost like he's a Herschel Walker but on defense. Whereas you get all these numbers, these great moments and everything, but at the end of the day, it's just a whole lot of nothing.
That's a great analogy, going back old school. Yeah, and he's one of these guys who will go and he'll get you 3-4 sacks in a game, and everyone will be singing his praises, and then he'll get shut out the next few weeks. He, what we like to say in the statistical world, is a high standard deviation.
Mm-hmm. And what about let's slide over before we get to our picks segment, which everyone loves. Let's talk about the Bears a little bit, though. Cutler, getting, I guess, at odds with teammates. And I liked what happened after that game against the Packers when finally, Deion Sanders was doing the post game, and he said, it comes down to this. And he prefaced it by saying, listen, I'm not hating on anybody, but when it comes down to Cutler, every excuse has been made before, from offensive coordinators to his offensive line to new receivers, and every possible excuse has been made. He has to start playing the position. He just has to start playing the position of quarterback, make his reads, know when to get rid of the ball. He's just not doing those things as a quarterback.
Definitely. And you almost feel like he's become a diva. He's been coddled. And let's look at the last few Super Bowl teams. I mean, the Giants, the Patriots, the Packers, the Steelers. Can you honestly say any of those teams had just unbelievably great offensive lines with the all-time greats, the 1960s Green Bay Packers? No. But you know what? Their quarterbacks made plays. If you got to get rid of the ball a little sooner, do it. But you got Brandon Marshall now. You got Mike Martz out of there. It's time to put up or shut up. And you're going to have those games sometimes, but you can't quit in this league. You just can't do it. And he's going to get a rap, and people are really starting to turn on him. Cornerback on his team, DJ Moore, even said it was unfair what he did to Webb, the left tackle. I mean, he's going to lose his own locker room, and it's still mid-September.
Exactly. And one other thing, I think when it comes down to, I think almost a little bit of overanalyzing because, back in the day, we didn't hear all the talk about necessarily offensive lines, new offensive coordinators, things like that. So I think there's more excuses thrown into the mix than really the average football fan can process. So there's always some type of excuse for someone who plays bad. And at what point does it just go back on their shoulders? And that's what I think we're reaching for with a lot of the football culture now, because you have so many people trying to make excuses other than this player is not performing. It's like Chris Johnson. I don't care who your offensive line is. With an NFL offensive line and with the skill that Chris Johnson supposedly has, he should be averaging at least 3 yards a carry. Has to.
Yeah, it's not that hard, especially given you've got backup running backs doing that. It's really not that hard. And I agree with you. There are a lot of excuses made. Some of these guys are getting coddled. Perhaps it's just kind of a microcosm of society and what we've become as a country. I don't know. I'm just play a sociologist on TV. But, I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous. I think back to two guys. I think back to Jack Youngblood playing in the Super Bowl with a broken leg. And I think back to Emmitt Smith back in the mid-'90s with a NFC division title on the line against the Giants. He got banged up. They didn't know what the injury was at the time, but he was basically playing with a broken bone in his shoulder.
I remember that.
He ran all over the Giants and carried them in overtime to a title, and they ended up winning another Super Bowl. So, you know what? these guys just have to put up or shut up. They're making a lot of money, and they have to perform.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's go ahead and get down to the segment that everybody loves. Of course, the picks of the week. We get to prognosticate on a few things here, and let's pick up some of the more interesting games this week. Just a little bit of a transition happening, and one thing we talked about. We'll start with the New York Giants in the Thursday night tilt against the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. That's Cam Newton. And that Giants front seven, we talked about them needing to get going. I think this would be a good week to do that.
Yeah, it's about time. Short week, national TV again. I think they better, and especially with Cam Newton staring them in the face on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So this is the time. And traditionally, the Giants have had issues with some of these more mobile quarterbacks. You even look at last year, Vince Young filling in for an injured Michael Vick gave them fits, and the Eagles won at the Meadowlands. So they better come up with a good plan, and Tuck, Umanura, Pierre-Paul, etc. Better start chasing Cam, or he might eat them alive with his arm or his feet.
All right, so talking about Jason Pierre-Paul, I know you're down with JPP, but
yeah, you know me.
Yeah. All right. So who have you got in this game?
Is there any sort of insider trading laws? Given I've got a dog in this fight, you know what? I'll go with the Giants, given the fact that they've got some momentum coming in off of a big comeback win over Tampa Bay. Luckily, Eli's still standing after Greg Schiano's little shenanigans at the victory formation at the end of that game. And the main reason I say that is I think that Tom Coughlin will not let them have another no-show this week. He just will not. And if they do, there will be hell to pay. So I'll pick the Giants, and you can pick on me later when this blows up in my face. But I'll point back to the fact that I only lost one of my picks last week.
No, I've got, you know what? I've got the Giants in this matchup as well. I don't think they're going to go in and lay an egg again, but I got the Giants. I hope, I hope they win this game. The Giants, they got to get on track and just start playing that championship football. Remember, when you win the Super Bowl, every team wants to beat you just a little bit more. If you could win one game out of the season, you'd want to beat the defending Super Bowl champs, of course, and that's something else the Giants are dealing with this year.
Definitely, and we saw the Cardinals do that with the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
You can't take any team lightly.
And, speaking of the Patriots, they got Philadelphia. Patriots in Philadelphia, I believe that's this week.
Baltimore, right? Sunday night?
Baltimore. I'm sorry, not the Patriots. The Eagles. Yeah. Eagles and the Cardinals.
Oh, right. Yeah, in Arizona.
Eagles and the Cardinals.
Showdown of undefeated teams, yeah.
Yeah, and I look at this. The Eagles, 2-0, but they've got 9 turnovers in 2 games. Is this finally the game where that whole thing unravels on them and the Cards take them down?
Could be, because like I said before, I'm bullish on the Cardinals' defense. They got a really young team, really aggressive. Patrick Peterson, I think, is just going to be a superstar. I mean, not only is this guy a punt returner extraordinaire, he made a game-saving tackle, he had an interception. This guy's going to be a difference maker. So the Eagles better hold on to the ball, because you can't be winning game after game by averaging 4 and 5 turnovers a week. You can get away with it against the Browns of the world,
right?
And you can get lucky against the Ravens, but once you get into that playoff caliber portion of the schedule in the NFC East and some of these other NFC opponents, they're going to make you pay for it.
Okay, so when we look at that game, how would you pick that? Are you going to go ahead with the Eagles or the magic of the Cardinals?
I'm going to stick with the Cardinals' magic. I think that they'll be able to give Vic some fits and continue the turnover trend. I think Kevin Kolb will do just enough to get the win. I think he also probably would like to get Larry Fitzgerald involved in the loop a little more. He only had 1 catch last week, so I'm going to go with the Big Red on this one.
All right, and you know what? I wish I could disagree so that we could have a little bit of controversy here, but I'm going with the Cardinals as well, and that means that in 2 weeks from now, when I go to Arizona and check out the Dolphins against the Cardinals, I may see the Dolphins hang their first loss on them. But we're going to pick that game next week, so let's not worry about that at this time.
Definitely, I'm envious that you get to go to such a beautiful stadium.
Yeah, you've been there, man. Okay,
Yeah, real nice.
All right, so you know what? A battle of 0-2 teams. Kansas City, New Orleans. In New Orleans. Is this now New Orleans? When I look at this game, they can't go down 0-3. This is going to be the game right now. I mean, if New Orleans loses this game, the season isn't over, but no reason to think why they would go 10-3 the rest of the way and make a playoff run. New Orleans has to win this game, but they give up points to everybody.
Yes, could potentially be a high-scoring game. I know I was very high on the Chiefs coming into this year. I'm not sure what happened with their defense. They've got the weapons on offense. Jamal Charles hasn't really hit the ground running this year.
Right.
I'm basing this pick on home field and the fact that the Saints are back up against a wall, and it's the us versus the world mentality, and kind of this whole thing with Jonathan Vilma. Is he going to be reinstated? What will Goodell do? So I really don't see the Saints laying 2 eggs at home now, 3 weeks into the season. So I'll pick them, and will probably be a fairly high-scoring affair.
Yep, I think so. I think you're right as well. And just because at a certain point, it has to come together for them. This is a critical game at home, and they still have that, they talk about the heart of a champion. It's still got to be beating in there somewhere. So I got to go with the Saints in this game as well. Let's pick a couple of really, these should be fun games. And the first one is in San Diego, Matty Ice and the Atlanta Falcons going to San Diego for what should be just a fantastic football game in San Diego. Chargers, Falcons, how do you see it?
I think it's going to be a great game. I think the difference in this game, besides which Matt Ryan shows up, and I happen to think the new and improved Mr. September, as I like to call him, I think he's going to show up. I think what the difference will be ultimately is, can the Chargers get their running game off the ground? And even if Ryan Matthews plays, he's probably still a little banged up. I think I'd rather go with Mr. DUI Turner in my battle of the running backs. And I just think the Falcons' offense is really clicking right now, and their defense showed up last week. Really not too intimidated by the Chargers' new group of wide receivers. I know Rivers been playing well. He really liked throwing to Dante Rosario last week, but they don't scare me. So I'm gonna say the ATL makes it a perfect 3-0 in San Diego.
All right, and you know what? Looking at how they looked on Monday night, I got to go with them as well, because you got the defense playing inspired, and like you said, Matty Ice playing well, and Turner a chance to. You always kind of like to stick it to your old team as well. You remember Turner started out in San Diego when they had that great glut of great running backs there. When they had Sproles, when they had Michael Turner, when they had LaDainian Tomlinson, all those guys on the same roster. And Turner winds up going out there to Atlanta. So I think a little bit of incentive for him to get on track this week. And I think that in what will be a great, entertaining game, maybe the best game of the weekend, I like Atlanta winning this thing probably by about 3 or 4 points. It's going to be a close game, but I think ultimately Atlanta wins it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Should be as long as it's a great game, I'm happy.
Yeah, there you go. So, hey, and how about the Sunday night game? Let's talk about the New England Patriots. New England Patriots against the Baltimore Ravens. Look at both sides. T-Sizzle, of course, still out for Baltimore, but offensive side of the ball for the Patriots. You had Aaron Hernandez go down. In the interim, they pick up Kellen Winslow, Jr., not senior, and they also re-signed Deion Branch as well to kind of fill in there. One other thing with the Patriots, remember, Wes Welker only has 8 catches so far, so is he kind of in limbo in that offense? And the Patriots have not looked grand at all. In fact, they lost that game to the Cardinals, which was unthinkable in Foxborough. So kind of a big game for both of those teams coming up here.
Yeah, we got a rematch of the AFC title game.
Right.
I would love to pick the Ravens at home, but given the fact that the Patriots really lost a winnable game to the Cardinals at the end of the day, I do not see Belichick not having this team prepared. Not sure what's going on with he and Welker and this either imaginary or real doghouse he's been in, but two of them better kiss and make up soon, because he's going to need him more than ever with Hernandez out. I don't know about you. I think I'd rather sort of Welker over Branch or Winslow Jr.
Right.
So I think the Patriots will rebound. I think they'll come up with some sort of defensive scheme to confuse Joe Flacco. Patriots get back in gear.
Well, I think, I'm going to have to go the other way on this one. I think that with the kind of a heartbreak loss against the Eagles this past Sunday, and really the Patriots, when I watched them play that game against the Cardinals, something is not quite right there. So I'm going to look at the revenge factor for the Ravens and playing at home. I like the Ravens to come out in this game, and maybe by the narrowest of margins, but I'm going to go with the Ravens in this big tilt against the Patriots in something that should be, again, a highly entertaining affair.
We've been very lucky the first 3 weeks. We've had some really great matchups and games down to the wire, and I think week 3 will be more of the same.
Yeah. All right, fantastic. So about time to wrap things up. So let's go ahead and, the final send-off. Everybody listens to me a little too much. Everybody knows Inside Sports. Follow me on Twitter at the Inside Sports. However, follow Mr. Lardieri at Chris L Sports. So before we sign off, Mr. Lardieri, Chris, what's up, man? Any final words for everyone out there?
Yeah, you can always find me at Football Nation /author /Chris-Lardieri. My column's called FN Follies. Usually comes out Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning, depending on the release time. And like I said, this week's title is Tom Coughlin and Greg Schiano's Meadowlands Melee. I know a lot of people have weighed in on this. Personally, I think while it's completely legal what the Buccaneers did, it sets a bad precedent. And this isn't college football, and these big boys are making a lot of money. So you're going to run the wrath of either retaliation or Mr. Roger Goodell on Park Avenue coming down on you with risk of putting players' safety in jeopardy. On top of that, one other game this week I know we didn't cover, the Texans-Broncos game.
Yeah.
I think that should set up to be a great affair. This will really be another test for Peyton Manning. So really excited. I really can't remember in a long time the first weeks of the NFL season being this packed with so many good, evenly matched games. So looking forward to it.
Exactly. In fact, the way the things are going, we might, we'll talk off air, obviously, but we might have to wind up breaking this thing down into one show that talks about the previous week's games and another show that previews the next week's game, because I love this. I love it.
It's great. I mean, you can't beat it, and people wonder why the league's so popular. And one more thing before we go, just briefly mention the passing of one of the pioneers of NFL television, Steve Sable with NFL Films.
Yeah.
Died far too young from brain cancer, and I'm sure you're in the same boat as me. I basically grew up watching those old films narrated by John Facenda. The great music. I even own the CD. I listen to it. I know that makes me sound like a nut job, but nothing better at putting you in the mood than some good old NFL Films music on a Sunday. I listened to it driving to the Super Bowl when I went in 2001. It's really just everyone talks about the NFL and TV, and were it not for him and his dad Ed, I really don't even know if the NFL would be the TV juggernaut that it is today. So rest in peace.
Exactly. And, that's what I tell people when I just pull out all these random things about the NFL, and they ask me, how do you know this? And I say, what can I say? I just didn't date a whole lot, which I didn't. Hey, if there was a game on, there was a game on. That's all there was to it.
Yeah, I was a little younger than you, so I didn't quite kind of discover the females yet. But, I mean, so many people I've talked to in the last few days are like, oh, I love those videos. Watching the shows and watching the recaps every week and the music, and really a lot of people appreciate what he did. And let's face it, I heard a stat where something like 98% of the American football viewing population has never been to an NFL game. So that truly underlines what a TV sport it is.
And he did it back in the days when there wasn't a whole lot of big money in it either. So a lot of that was done. It was a labor of love. I mean, all those hours and hours just spent in the cutting room, and it wasn't about computers either, just matching up this and that, all that stuff, chopping that together on films, and that's just a lot of man hours that were spent. And yeah, the game will never be it owes him forever. I'll say that. I won't say will never be the same, but he's one of those guys who really, like you say, laid that foundation for it. Fantastic.
Definitely a visionary, and it put the fine town of Mount Laurel, New Jersey on the map, where my good friend Paul hails from.
All right. Fantastic. All right, thanks a lot, Chris. We'll have to do this again next week.
You're welcome. Looking forward to it as always.
All right, perfect. So for Mr. Lardieri, I'm Charles E. Smith Jr. This is an Inside Sports production of Football Talk. Thanks for watching, and we will see everybody next week.